Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have Rob Sutter. Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. We are going to be doing some really, really fun stuff. But before we talk about what we're going to be doing, let's talk a little bit about you. So for folks who aren't familiar with your work, do you want to give us a little bit of a background?
Sure. So I am a big fan of serverless. I'm currently the head of developer advocacy here at Fauna. The serverless database, don't call it that. It's the data API for modern applications. It's a serverless database. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble if the CEO hears me say that, but I'm pretty confident he's not on Twitch. Let's hope I'm right. Prior to that, I was with the serverless team at AWS. So, of course, all the such serverless classics as AWS Step Functions, AWS Lambda, Amazon Event Bridge, all of those things. And I just love to build. I love to build in public. I've done all manner of stuff outside of tech as well. Worked for the government. I was in the military. So, here and there, all over the world, just an all around guy.
all around guy. I like it. So Fauna, I think, is kind of, well, let's set some context before we talk about Fauna specifically, right? So I think that a lot of the folks who watch the show are front-end developers. I'm a front-end developer. Over the course of my career, we come in contact with the need for storing data. And what I found consistently is that a lot of times I am more willing to talk myself out of an idea than deal with the process of starting up and hosting and figuring out how to deploy a database, right? And so I feel like as front-end developers, we get kind of sold this idea that we should be full stack, and being a full stack developer is completely infeasible, right? Like there's just so many things you got to know. You can't really become an expert in all the things that you need. So then Fauna kind of comes in and it's offering something that you called it a serverless database. But it's part of this kind of new class of database systems that is really interesting to me as a front-end developer, because I don't have to think about how to stand it up, how to deploy it, how to get it out there, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what is Fauna? How does it work for us?
Yeah. So I'll get to Fauna. I want to hit on a couple of things you said as well. First off, I'm glad you came out there with the opinion on being a full stack developer. There's just so much to learn. I'm a back end developer, and so everything that all of y'all do on the front end just mystifies and amazes me. I don't get it. I'm like, I can't. We all make the joke about not being able to center a div. That's not a joke. I can't do it. Much less make something look feasible. So everything we do on the back end, y'all have been doing on the front end, and B, making it look good at the same time. So I think it's fantastic what front end developers do, and it mystifies and amazes me. I also think, like a lot of the points you said about Fauna, I think Fauna is a great match for front end developers because you're already consuming APIs elsewhere. Like you want to process a payment in your app, you're going to Stripe. You want to send an SMS, you're going to Twilio. You want to embed search, you look at something like Algolia. So you already know how to do all of these things. Mm-hmm. You know how to get an API key and store it securely in your application. You know how to handle user authentication and roles. Maybe you're doing that with Auth0. Like all of these concepts that you're doing, you're just doing the same thing with Fauna, right? So you create a query, just like with GraphQL, right? It's either a query or a mutation. You send it to Fauna, and that's it. Like, stop thinking about the rest, because you hit on, it's so difficult to manage. Even if you do it cloud first, you've got to create a virtual private cloud. What's that? That's a whole category of problems we can talk about for a day. You've got to get all the security groups right. Oops, that's wide open. Now all my stuff is out there for everybody. There's just all of these things that you have to go through just to get it functional. And that doesn't even begin to get at what do you have to do to get it correct and performant, right, and fault tolerant. And all of these other like back end things that now I start to become in my element and nerd out on, so that you don't have to. It's just another service. Put your API key in your app, authenticate your user, send your call, store and retrieve your data.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's really the magic of this stuff, right? Is that we start talking about like as front end developers, the thing that attracts me to this kind of Jamstack decoupled paradigm is that we're getting to the point where everything we're doing is building a front end and then sending API calls to do everything else. So if I can form a JSON object and send a fetch, I'm able to do almost everything that I need to do to interact with different backend platforms. And that feels like what, when we start looking at Fauna, that is kind of what's happening here, right? We're no longer like, I don't have to figure out how do I do like a special connection. I don't have to set up like, connects or open a raw MySQL connection or any of those sorts of things. I don't have to think about what that actually means. I have a database and I'm going to send a request to the GraphQL endpoint or to the, the other Fauna database endpoints, and I'm going to get a response back. And that's my data. I'm done. I've built a custom database as far as I need to care, right? And I think that's what really makes this such a powerful idea, is that I, as a front-end developer, want to be able to build things. I don't want to have to think about how to deploy and scale things. And there are companies out there that do this for us. As you said, Stripe just handles payments so that I don't have to think about the security and the compliance and all of the infinite things that can go wrong with payment. And with database, it's the same thing. If a database for me on my local machine, cool, whatever, it takes me 10 seconds. A database that needs to work here and in Australia, that's a whole different set of problems, right? And Fauna is just making that go away. And I think that's what's exciting.
It is exciting. It's hard to talk about Fauna because there's so much, and like I'm a back end centric person, but our engineers are just on a whole other level from me. And there's all this world-class engineering that's going into Fauna, and there's all these firsts in there, and you really want to talk about them all the time, but quite frankly, nobody cares. Like, what you want is a place to put your data and to get your data when it's there. So it's an interesting thing to try and not talk about so often when we're working with it. But just like you said, the fact is, you put data into Fauna, you define your GraphQL schema, you perform a mutation, and boom, that record is available in multiple locations for you to either read it or for resiliency, right? And tons of tech stuff you can go into, but really that's all you need to know about it, is that it's there and working.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think like when you start dreaming about this idea of full stack developers, like that's what unlocks that promise. If you're a front end developer and you can do the website stuff, and then you have services like Fauna and Stripe and all the headless CMSs, all these other myriad services you can pull up and use, you are now a full stack developer because you've got these platforms filling in all of those scalability and dependability and reliability gaps that you would have to build a whole team around. But because these services are there and providing you with APIs, you as a front end developer can now kind of build incredibly complex apps without having to build that whole extra set of skills. And it really is like, it's like gaining superpowers when you really start to put together what serverless and these platforms unlock for you.
Yeah. I think front end development is the most valuable part of the stack. Don't get mad at me, everybody else, because it touches the customer. It defines the customer experience for the customer. And it's the most differentiated. It's always going to be the most differentiated, which means all the work that you're doing there is creating some sort of value for the customer, value for the company, differentiating you from your competition. And I like talking about, do you understand power systems theory? Do you understand supply chain economics and diversification of fuel sources? Because these are things that are still happening underneath your app, but you're not considering them right now, right? Your app's running somewhere in a data center, and that data center has to have power from multiple types, and those have to be fueled from these are all things that have been commoditized and stripped away from you. So why would you go learn how to manage a database if you want to deliver customer impact any more than you would go learn mining?
You know what? I love that you bring that up, because it's kind of funny where we draw these arbitrary lines for like what needs to be built in-house versus what shouldn't be. Because I always laugh when somebody's like, well, but if you don't understand how your tools work, you can't really be good with your tools. And it's like, Man, I don't know how to get down to my motherboard and flip a bit from 1 to 0. So I have zero understanding of how my tools work. I know how the baseline abstraction of JavaScript works. I sort of understand what happens under that, and then it's a mystery. I don't know my tools at all. I am absolutely using somebody's abstraction of an abstraction of an abstraction that makes rocks think. And that's...
we do have the smartest rocks.
We do. Smartest rocks in the galaxy here on planet Earth. That's
But I mean, you don't even have to get out of software for that, man. Like name every register in your CPU. Oh, you just upgraded to an Apple Silicon M1 ARM. Name all the new registers in your CPU, right? And you don't have to go down to that level either. I mean, you can't know all this stuff. It's folly to suggest otherwise. So
yeah, right. And so really where we have to be as developers is honestly just as humans, we're here to solve problems. We're not here to know everything. And so we should choose the abstractions that enable us to solve problems. And I don't have the time to learn every single thing, but I do have enough time to learn this one common abstraction, which is an API. And because everybody's really starting to coalesce around this idea of, you have an API endpoint, you have GraphQL or REST or however you want to send these queries, you are able to send and receive data through a common interface. And that means that I, as a front-end developer, only have to learn that. That's the boundary I have to learn up to. Everything else is an abstraction. I don't care how Stripe processes payments. I don't care how Fauna processes data. I just care that when I send it some data, I get a response back, and that response is what I need.
Right. Exactly right. And the differentiation in there is, Stripe handles fraud detection and alerting and things like that. So you don't have to run massive machine learning models and learn machine learning and learn theory behind fraud detection and all this. It's not only storage, right? Like there's so much specialization that they do. Similarly, you don't have to, worry about learning, distributed consensus algorithms and multi-phase commit versus single phase locks. And
I don't even want to learn what those words mean.
Why? Yeah. In fact, I made one of those up, and I'll look. Some savvy user out there can tell which one it is.
We'll go 2 algorithms and a lie with Rob Sutter.
That's right. My favorite distributed consensus algorithms: Paxos, Raft, and Sesame Street. One of those is a lie.
I'm actually worried that it's not Sesame Street that's the lie.
That term was used without authentication or permission from the Sesame Street Broadcasting Company. I apologize and regret the error.
We're gonna get a DMCA takedown.
That was my mistake, not the show's mistake.
All right, y'all. So okay. Knowing all of that, talking about that, let's talk a little bit about specifically what we're going to try to accomplish today. So we've got some content of like how to get up and running with Fauna on Learn with Jason already, but we're not talking about that today. We're instead talking about something that's even a little more, is advanced the right word? I guess just customized, which is user-defined functions. And I'm really interested to hear about this. So can you talk a little bit about what this means?
Yeah, let's not call it advanced or customized. Let's call this a growth session.
Okay. Yeah.
This is you've gotten logged in, you've gotten a basic GraphQL schema, and you're eventually going to run into a point where you want to do something that's not supported, or you want to enforce something at the data layer. A user-defined function is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's user-defined, so you create the definition. It's a function, so it's compute.
Nice. Thank you, Indifferent Ghost.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Boop crew.
On Jason's behalf. Yeah, we don't have any boops yet. I'm kind of
I know. We haven't gotten the chat going. Sometimes you just gotta you gotta put the quarter in, right? So we've got a new subscriber. Right. You got to abuse that new boop that you've got. There it is. Here we go.
There it is. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Appreciate it, y'all. And the last point is it's a function. Right. And so that means that it's compute that's running. The thing about this, you talked about duality of data or something earlier that I thought was really appropriate, where this is happening on your data. in the Fauna data centers. And this is different even from something like if you run, say, AWS Lambda and DynamoDB, you've still got to load that data into your function, do some processing on it, store the result, and send it back. This is happening. They're co-located. Your compute and your data are co-located on the same instances. So it's right there, if you want to think about it conceptually, on the same machine. So it's really performant. And there's several use cases for it. Some are just simple, quote unquote, custom business logic. And we'll walk through some simple examples. But you can also do really advanced stuff here. And it's, maybe beyond what we'll show today, but you can do fault injection. So, like chaos engineering and fault tolerance, where you intentionally insert errors on a certain frequency in order to determine if your overall system handles that error. You can do unit testing of your functions with that. You can do very advanced ABAC or attribute-based access control for your functions to ensure that all of these conditions are met before a write or a read occurs. And user-defined functions are just really powerful ways of encapsulating that logic and hiding it from the user. So you can do that with guards, or they may not even know that they're calling all of this logic. It's just you create a create boop function, and all the user knows is I want a boop. And they request it, and if all the right conditions are met, they get a boop.
Got it.
And if those conditions aren't met, including intentionally injected failure, they don't get a boop. And that's all they need to worry about. So it gets reused among different components of your application as well.
That's slick. Okay, so I feel like at this point we're starting to talk about things in more concrete terms. So let's switch over into pair programming view here, and let's talk for a minute about the live captioning. So this show, like all of our shows, is being live captioned. We've got Rachel here with us today. Thank you so much, Rachel. And that is being done by White Coat Captioning. The captioning is made possible by our sponsors, Netlify, Fauna, thank you, Rob, Auth0, and Hasura, all of whom are kicking in to make the show more accessible to more people. It means a lot to us. And I should call out, this is not a sponsored episode. Fauna is a sponsor of the show, and this is a show about Fauna, but it's not. I don't know how to differentiate. Yeah, exactly right. Like this episode is not like Fauna was like, you have to do this or else.
No, I can be kicked off at any time if I underperform. It's very important that you all know. Like I'm just skating on the razor's edge right now.
Yes. So yes. All right. So now make sure you go and follow Rob on Twitter, RTS_Rob. And we are today talking about Fauna. So if you want to go check out Fauna, that's where you want to start it. So I want to do some data. I'm ready. How do I get started with this?
Hey, can we sidebar? I want to show 15 seconds.
Sure.
You said this is not a getting started with Fauna episode, but if you click that sign up button, can you show them how easy it is to get started with Fauna? We won't go through the whole thing, but look at that. You got a GitHub account, you can get started with Fauna. You got a Netlify account, you can get started with Fauna. Boom, account, free tier, don't have to provide any payment information, drop you right in there, ready to go. So
the free tier is
time that I've run my mouth, you all could have created Fauna accounts.
Well, and the free tier is good too, right? So we get you get quite like 100K reads per month, 50K writes per month, 500K compute. Now that's what we're building today, right? Is the compute.
And we're going to talk about those too. Yeah.
And 100 megabytes of storage. So this is something where like I, as a developer, am able to run a handful of things on Fauna, and I don't even get close to these free limits. So this is very much like you can start here and you'll be able to use it to get your business up to the point where it makes sense to pay for things. That's a model that's pretty near and dear to my heart. Like at Netlify, we do the same thing. We want you to be able to use it for free until you make money from it. And when you start to make money from it, then it makes sense to pay for your services, right? So it's kind of like we want to start with you and grow with you and make all that work. Yeah. So
side note, before we go off of that, hard limits enforced, and that's a decision that we made so that you can play in there safely. Get a runaway
hard limits
function.
Means that when I hit I do 100,001, it just says, nah, you're done.
Right. Rather than starting to bill you and you getting a surprise bill. And then the other plans allow you to, manage overages and things like that. So
yeah. Cool. All right. So let me log in. I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in with my Netlify account here.
Yeah. While you're doing that, we got a question in the chat. How does a company provide such a generous free tier? Always baffles me. There's a whole lot of pricing theory around this, and it's customer acquisition cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hope here is that you'll do like what Jason and I have done, and go out and build with Fauna. And then when it comes time at your work, that you'll say, hey, I've built with this database. It's really awesome. All you got to do is just put your data in it, get it out. It handles everything for you. We should use it for this project. Yeah. And then that becomes like we grow that way. And your company will need to pay for it because of the scale and size of data that it has.
Right.
But you as an individual can learn for free. And side note, I pay for Netlify as well because the analytics are so valuable for me.
And I think that's the other thing too, is when you start thinking about like software as a service, if you're trying to build out something and you're considering a free tier, the way that the pricing is shaped, it is significantly more expensive to try and support like tens of thousands of $5 a month customers than it is to do a free tier with like forum-based support that doesn't require active headcount and have like paid enterprise customers. Because enterprise customers, if you look at what a company like IBM or Amazon is paying for their monthly contracts, it's in the like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month for a given service. So enterprise contracts totally make up the difference. That's why companies are able to do free tiers, is because when you as an individual developer go sell this to your boss and you work at Facebook, it absolutely pays for all the free services that you got, like many, many times over.
That's right.
And again, we don't want to monetize individuals. We want you to build things and like learn and have fun. We want companies that make money from services to pay for services. That's where it makes sense.
That's right.
Cool. Okay. So I'm here. I'm in. I've done 1,829 read ops over the last 7 days on Fauna.
You got 998,181 to go. Let's not use them all on this episode.
Yeah, let's see how aggressive the chat gets here. But let's get started here. I'm just going to start a new database. Is that right?
Yeah, let's do it. New database.
Right. So we're going to call this one user defined functions. And do I want to pre-populate?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's pre-populate it. It gives us, it's not a ton of data. Gives you something to work against, query against, and just sort of gives everybody the same pre-populated data so that you can take the functions we write today, put them in your own database, and off we go.
Mm-hmm. And so now, all right, so I've got some data in here. Let's pop one of these open and look at it. We've got, customer, first name, last name, address, phone number, credit card. Okay.
Yep.
All these things. Good.
Not a real credit card, I hope.
Not well. Yeah. Well.
That just in case anybody's not super familiar with Fauna, a collection is a collection of documents. You probably think about that like a table if you're coming from a relational database background. A document is an item or a row if you're coming from other platforms. We call them collections and documents. And fun fact that informs a lot of theory, everything is a document in Fauna.
And these are like unstructured, right? Like I can put whatever I want in here. It's I guess the term that you would use is NoSQL. Is that how you would describe Fauna?
We would say schemaless. Fauna is sort of, it's a next generation NoSQL database if you want to pigeonhole it that way. But it works with both schema oriented and schemaless models. So if you're building with GraphQL and you upload your GraphQL schema, then you're going to have that defined schema in there because GraphQL requires it. But it's enforced by the GraphQL layer, not the underlying database layer. So you could, in theory, migrate away from that and start doing naughty things. But then you'll get drift off of your GraphQL schema, which will cause problems for you with GraphQL.
Yeah.
But gives you the flexibility to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's always the trade-off, right? About going with like something structured versus unstructured. You can do whatever you want with unstructured, which makes it flexible. You get a lot of freedom. Also, you can do whatever you want with it, and that's a huge foot gun. So.
Yeah, it is. It is, but one foot gun that it isn't is single table. So you still model
Hmm.
everything the way you think about it. Single table design is fascinating if your access patterns are fixed. You've got to break your brain to get to it. Fauna allows you to think about things the way you've always thought about them. You do an ERD or entity relationship diagram to define the structure and relationships of your data. That's exactly what your collections are going to look like inside Fauna as well. So that helps smooth the learning curve a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does, because I feel like just looking at tables in general, if you're not super familiar with data, can be a little like, okay, so I've got these and I can just create a new one whenever I want. Yeah, you sure can. You can just do whatever you want. And so having to figure out how you would fit all of that into a single mental model where it's like, okay, so I'm putting it into data, and then I got to make it into a data customer or a data product, and it's like, okay, I can get there, but that's more than I want to do. But okay, so we've got this data, this kind of general setup of different places you can go and buy things, the products, orders for things, and the customers who made those orders.
Yep.
What should we do next?
Well, not go to functions, but let's go to functions anyway. So if you go to functions, you'll see that there's one that's been created for you.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's not going to help you learn today. It's a more realistic but far more complex than how we want to start.
Okay.
So let's go over to the shell instead.
Ooh, I've never been to this tab.
You've never been to the shell? The shell's
No,
my friend.
I pretty much only use the GraphQL tab. This is where I live in Fauna. I've never used FQL either.
Ooh, well, boys, today going to be a treat for you because user-defined functions are written exclusively in FQL, although they can be consumed in GraphQL. And we can do some what I call stupid GraphQL tricks later. The stupid is a modifier for the tricks, not for GraphQL.
Gotcha.
Get mad at me about that. Where you don't even have to define types. You can only define queries with resolvers that are functions. And then in GraphQL, you're consuming your underlying FQL structure. That's a little advanced. We won't start from there. The first thing we should do is
let's start easy.
Let's start with let's do Hello World.
Okay, right. I'm into it. Yeah, go easy on me.
So we got to do Hello World. All right. What you see here is the code editor, right? Everybody can figure that part out. So the bottom is where you're going to write your code, and the top is where you're going to get some results. So we can maybe adjust that balance a little bit.
Add code. We would need to add code. Adjusting. Oh, cool. Look at that.
A little drag up like that there. And just real quick, you can real quick, you can clear that. You can download it, save it for later. You can upload files. Maybe you've got a repository with some sample user-defined functions that have been written by some cunning Fauna DAs, and you want to upload those yourself, then this would be a good place to do that.
Okay.
Hypothetically speaking, but so you can just go ahead and click clear.
If you want to jump ahead and see what he's hinting at, this is this is a repo full of examples that we may fall back on if I can't figure this out myself.
We may because there's always syntax, and the syntax is going to be new because it's FQL, but it is learnable. I have learned it. That is how I know it is learnable. I've learned parts of it. I never claimed to master anything. All right. But so we'll get rid of all those paginate calls there at the bottom.
Get rid of them.
Yeah. And we want to create a function. So I like just typing stuff out. Type create, see what happens.
Hey, look at that. Okay, create function.
Create function. There we go. We use parentheses. Go ahead and hit enter to split those. And now if we go to the docs, it's going to give us a very complex example, but let's just functions. Everything in Fauna takes objects as input. Those objects aren't strictly JSON objects, but they're similar. So go ahead and give us some curly braces here.
Curly braces.
Yeah. And split those. And a function has two components, a name and a body. So name, colon, is the separator for key values. And then quotes and hello world. Here we go. Now, naming conventions, you can't have spaces in there. So
right. So this is like the actual function name.
Yeah, this is going to be the actual name of the function.
Okay. And the body that can be whatever I want.
Well, it's not going to be in quotes. It's going to be in FQL.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
FQL is not a string-based language. Without getting too deep into it, if you've ever heard of a SQL injection, that's why FQL is not a string-based language.
Okay.
So it's composed, if you're familiar with the functional sides of JavaScript, which again is why I think front-end developers are way out ahead of the rest of us on the back end. If you can think functionally in JavaScript or TypeScript, you're on your way to thinking in FQL. Always be functioning, the ABCs of FQL. So the first thing we need here is a query.
Hackers, you dirty hackers.
Okay, so we got a query.
Yeah. And all calls, again, they're functions. So put some parentheses there. And then we're going to use what's called a lambda. A lambda is exactly what it sounds like everywhere else, right? It's an anonymous function defined right there. Lambdas take 2 parameters. Okay. If you want, you can split these out. If you don't, that's okay too. I always split mine out so that I know where I am on the line. Yeah. And so then we know that it's going to take 2 parameters. So you can put a little comma there and a return, and you got like parameter 1 and parameter 2, right?
Okay.
Parameter 1 is an array of arguments. Yes, that is the array designator in FQL. So let's call that first argument name, because it's hello world. So we want to pass it some function or some name, right, to say hello to. Arguments need quotes.
Okay.
Yep. And yes, it is functions all the way down, according from the chat. That is true. It is functions all the way down.
Functional turtles.
Functional turtles. So here, what we're going to do is use the concat function.
Concat?
Yeah. See, that completion there is really helpful. Concat does exactly what you think it does. It takes some arguments and
is
combines
it like that?
them.
Or do I need to put it in as like separate?
So if you did that, it might actually work, but it wouldn't concatenate anything with anything. So I guess we're going to like step 1B by not just doing a static string. We're taking the string parameter. Yeah, you're running off ahead of me, but it's okay. The concat takes 1 or optionally 2 arguments. The first is an array of strings to concatenate.
Oh, I understand. Okay, so we got our array.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do one of these. Actually,
right.
let's talk to the chat. How about that? What's up, chat?
Hello, chat.
And then this is the glue?
That's right. That's the separator.
Okay. All right. So this is like this is, I mean, anytime you're learning something new, there's no way that I would have just intuited this, but it is kind of nice that the autocomplete here starts solving a lot of the initial problems. Yeah. I'm pretty fond of that. So we're done?
I got to count my parentheses, but that looks good to me. Do run query and let's see. Hey, it created it. Before we go off this, oh, sorry, you can go back up if you want. What it shows you is the command that it just ran and then the output of that command. So it's essentially the same as if you use the SDK and you create a query and send it. That's the response object that you get back. And what you see there is the ref, which is a unique identifier.
Right.
The timestamp, and then some other information about the function.
The name and the body.
Yeah.
Now it
which is collapsed.
It did not execute this function though.
That's right. What it did was it created that function. Or again, if you want to get really technical, it created a document in the functions category that you can now invoke, right?
Is that going to be in my collections or I guess it would be in the functions?
It's going to be in functions. We can go over there now and see.
Here's my hello world.
Yep.
Cool.
You didn't give it a role, so of course it doesn't have one. And then there's the body of your function. So that's what we did here because we ran create function.
Yeah. I got you.
Now, when you want to call your function, you run call.
Call.
Yep. Call takes 2 arguments.
First one is the name of the function.
You would expect. The first one is a reference to the function because that function name can actually change. So you dereference, this is like a pointer. You use function. You can use ref. That's a separate thing for another time. Function right there. And then the name is a little bit of sugar to give you the reference.
Okay.
And then a comma. And then an array of parameters. If you only have one, you can simplify this to a single parameter. They are ordered, not named. So it's not like keyword args in Python. You just give it the name that you want it to run. Okay. It's really not going to matter for us here because we didn't use that parameter in our definition. So anything you give it, it should send back hello chat.
Okay. So let's modify this then to actually use that parameter. So can I edit right in the functions tab if I want to change my function?
You can. And in fact, I recommend that you do.
Okay. So I've defined a parameter, but we don't use it. So instead of this, I want to use the name. How would one do so?
Right. So the way you get a parameter is with the var keyword, VAR. So you can take out chat there. Var, like everything else, is a function. It's all functions, all the way down. Functions, functions, functions. Var, name, there you go. That's that.
Okay. So then I need to do a little bit of sugar here to make that work. Save it.
Yep.
Come back out here, run it again.
Yeah. Now you're gonna have a little. Hey.
Nice.
Hey.
Okay. All right. And so this, I saw a question that I want to answer before we move forward. Ricardo asked, do you know of any CMS using Fauna out of the box?
I was hoping that was going to scroll right off the chat because I do know of one and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now.
So they do exist, but
yeah.
we gotta Google for them.
Yeah, we gotta search. Let me see if I can get somebody to help me out. I've asked for the reference. I am extremely embarrassed that I cannot remember it.
It looks like Databrecht in the chat did link to a forum post. Let me grab that link.
Oh yeah.
And
now there's sorry. I should answer this in 2 ways. What I was thinking of is a customer who has built a CMS powered by Fauna. That is not, if you're asking for a CMS for your data in Fauna, that is a different thing. And the dashboard gives you some, there you go. This is more of that by Bruno that you're showing on the screen now. This is more of a CMS to access your data in Fauna pretty effectively. It's pretty intuitive. I've gone into it. I like it.
Nice.
There is also a CMS for building static site generator, right? Like putting the content into your Hugo or Gatsby site generator, right? Like built on top of Fauna. There is that as a customer use case as well. That's the one that was slipping my mind.
For sure. Yeah. I think there's even like, if you look at Gatsby and Fauna, there's a source to pull in your Fauna data and stuff like that. So there's definitely ways to kind of make it a first class sort of deal. And it looks like we have AJC Web Dev in the chat sharing more links as well. Here's a Dev2 post about building a headless CMS. But yeah, so lots and lots of options there for getting stuff done. Okay.
Basic editing. Sorry, if you want to show real quick just on collections, you can do basic editing in the console, in the dashboard, the way that you just edited the function. You can edit those documents the same way with your little, you got your little pencil icon over there.
Ooh, so I could just come in here.
So you can,
nice.
For one-offs. That's not as robust as the other solutions that we just pointed out, but to get you started, you can make quick edits there. Thanks for the tips, everybody.
Cool. Okay. So we've got ourselves a basic function.
Right.
It's running, it's working. And I guess the question that I have when we start looking at something like this is, how would somebody like use this? So if I'm actually like storing data, right? Like I'm probably going to be working in some other application and I'm going to be sending data in. How do we add these into our workflow? What's the kind of practical use case of a function like this?
Right. Without getting into too much theory, I'd say the first place I would start is by wrapping your primitives. What do I mean? Don't create, get, update, delete with those calls in Fauna. Do it through a function, even if the only thing that function does is call, create, get, update, delete, because it allows you to evolve it over time inside the database without modifying your client calls, right? So that's the first use case. The way you do this with FQL is you structure your queries, and JavaScript is a really easy example because you can import those different keywords that we used, var, query, body, etc., and use them directly to define a query in your JavaScript. And then you use a Fauna client that you instantiate to send that query, and then you handle the results when they come back.
Okay.
That's one path. There's also the GraphQL path where you use user-defined functions as resolvers for queries. And then you would literally specify the @resolver and the name hello world. And then in the query definition for the types, you would have to list name in this case. The names don't have to match, but you would have to list name as a string. It would accept one string, return another string using this user-defined function. So that way you can get it straight through GraphQL. And we can show that if you want to create another database that's just completely empty.
Yeah, let's do it.
Up to you.
So I'm going to create a new database. I'm not going to user-defined functions GraphQL. No database. So it's an empty collection now.
Yeah, which is actually just a document of type database.
Oh, look at that. Do I need to do I need to like define a schema now to do this?
You will, but first you need to get that function in. Or actually you don't. So yeah, let's open up a file and we can define a GraphQL schema really quickly.
Okay, so let me there's nothing in this, so let's just open this up and we can mess with some things. So I have an empty repo here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to create schema.graphql. And
I will say that for data research purposes, I observed to see whether you would type GQL or type out GraphQL all the way.
I don't know where I developed this habit, but I picked it up from some framework. So then let's see if I remember. We get our type query.
That's right.
And then in here we would want like get
say hello.
Say hello. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, boops. I mean, whatever.
And then in here we would get we'd do like name string.
Yep.
If I can type it out properly.
Yep. Required.
And that would return back a string.
Yep.
And that is a simple GraphQL schema.
Yes. But what we haven't done is wire up the resolver. It doesn't know that we have a UDF named hello world that's going to implement it.
Okay. Yep. You're right.
To do that, all you need to do is on the same line, just add a space @resolver.
I had a theory. And then
name hello world.
That's it?
That's it.
Ooh, okay. I understand. That's nice. So now what we're able to do then is I am not actually going to implement any data. This is effectively me saying, hey, Fauna, this one is basically an echo loop. I don't need to store anything for this to function. I just need you to call this function and spit back a process piece of data.
Correct.
Cool.
So you can upload this schema
Okay.
without creating any types, any other mutations, anything, right? Just that as is. And what's going to happen here is going to show us a couple concepts. One,
Oops,
just stop and talk.
Yeah, I need to get back into here's GraphQL.
So how hard it is to yeah.
And then I'm going to
GraphQL
import the schema. And we're going to drag this one onto this one. There it is. And let's open it. Oh, I screwed something up. What did I screw up? Expected field definition.
I don't think it stream, so I can't help you. Do you still hear me? There we go.
Type graph. Did I screw something? What did I do, chat? What do y'all see?
Type query, say hello name, string at resolver, hello world.
This is correct?
Yeah.
Invalid input string. Resolver, does it?
It's weird that it didn't highlight them the same, but do you have some kind of weird space in there?
What am I doing wrong here?
That looks exactly like how, oh, resolver name hello world. That's what it is.
Doing,
sorry.
Computer.
Whoops.
Whoops. You like this?
Resolver
Like that?
name : yes.
Okay, let's
That's
all good. All good. We're gonna try this one more time.
Yeah.
Hey, look at it go. All right, so
go.
now if I go into the docs, I've got this say hello, takes a string. Perfect. Okay, that's everything that I expect. My guess is this explodes if I try it right now, right?
Well, it's not exploding, but it's not going to give you what you want or what you expect. But go ahead and run it. Like I said, it'll be instructive for a couple reasons.
Function hello world was not implemented yet. This is a good error message. I was really worried that it was going to give us one of those kind of generic, like, unable to determine, invocation at line whatever, instead of just, doing what I want, which is to tell me that I haven't done my job yet. This is really slick, though.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said we didn't have some of those, but this isn't one of them.
I think we all end up with those at some point in the code base, but it is nice that this one, at least, when I'm coming straight out of the gate, right? Because I feel like as a beginner, that's when instructive errors are the most important. Because otherwise, I'm just going to throw my hands up, and be like, I don't have time for this. This is wonderful. So now I need to implement this function, which I will do by.
Well, let's see what happened here. Let's go over to functions. Let's see how it managed to get that response to us.
Wow! Look at that! Holy crap!
So when you imported a GraphQL schema with a custom resolver, it realized that resolver isn't there yet.
Behold, my bucket.
And so what it did was it went out and created that function for you with this error message in it.
Excellent.
So when you call it, hey, you didn't do that yet. I hope I'm still with you because my video is frozen.
You froze up there for a second, but
hopefully my audio is good.
Yep, audio's all good. Okay, so now we've got a query that's a Lambda, and so then I can just start implementing things, right? I can go back and do our thing, and it's going to be a concat,
right?
And it's going to concat hello name Okay, I think I've done that. I'm going to save it.
Yeah.
Let's go try this again. I'm going to go back to GraphQL. I'm going to run it again. String expected, array provided.
Yeah. This one, if you go back to the function definition, it's one of our...
Is it because I did this?
You need to... There's a It's hard for me to see. Is that a regular parentheses followed by a bracket? My screen is like gone out. Yeah, that's what it was. The Lambda expects an array of arguments, and then the local function to apply it, concat, yeah, does that. And then remember we said that that second argument in concat is optional. You've actually specified the default value.
Oh, so if I leave that out, it'll just work.
Right.
Okay, let's go back and try that again. Hey!
There we go.
Look at that, everyone.
So there's another point that we sort of glossed over here that I think is pretty important. Belongs to a database. And hey, thanks that Adrian guy.
Thank you for the sub.
Even when you create a child database, that's now the scope that you're working in, right? And this gives you isolation guarantees, right? So if you want, you can create a new database for each customer. And that maybe makes sense if you're doing like some B2B kind of SaaS thing. Mm-hmm. Or you can isolate environments, production, staging, testing, etc. And then you can upside, you can modify and have different versions of those functions in each environment. Downside, you have to manage them and keep them in sync. And we have tools for doing that, but that's probably outside of the scope of today's lesson.
Sure.
It's just something to be aware of. You did define hello world, but you defined it in the database user-defined functions. And now we're playing in user-defined functions GraphQL. So the GraphQL layer defined it for you. And now we've defined it. And now everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And this all makes, this makes sense. So what I'm kind of imagining from here is that I would probably want this to be like, I could do some kind of data pre-processing on query or a pre-processing before saving, so that I could, like, if I'm gonna, I think the saving a customer order one was a good example, where it looked like I didn't actually look at what the function did, but my guess is that we're doing some kind of validation. Like the order comes in and we're checking to make sure that required fields are there, or we're breaking a full name into a first and last name, or something like that, right? So how would we do that? Where let's maybe add another function here that would let me pre-process some data so that we could like send a mutation here and save some data, but like mutate it in a way. Like we'll pre-process this a little bit. Do you have
It's like you're reading my mind. And I know that you haven't actually seen this function in the repo, which is why it's even more impressive. Example number 2, for those of you following at home in the repo, is a limited sum or a limited adder. And basically, this is just like a contrived example, but it works for what you're describing. It lets you add 2 variables with a limit.
Okay.
And if it exceeds the limit, it aborts and throws an error. And if it doesn't, it returns the sum of those 2. And this is an example of that pre-processing, right? Like say you have an account limit where they want to order 500 of X, but they only have a limit of 50, right? So you want to fail the order. You don't trust the input from whatever client, right? Even if you control that client, you can still treat all input as untrusted and unvalidated. Mm-hmm. Do that validation in your database layer. And by the way, you can make that a function so that your create order function calls the validator, which calls something else, et cetera, right? So it's all composition now, where it just asks for validation without knowing what the validate rules are. And your validation team can begin applying increasingly complex logic. Feature flags, I didn't mention, but that's also an excellent use case for this, is feature flags, where if you want to compare releases or turn things on for other customers or not. So let's create a new function here. Let's go back. If we want to do it, I'll leave it up to you. We can either add it again in the GraphQL schema and show updating the schema, which will merge those changes and create
let's do that
skeleton for us.
I feel like this is, in terms of my standard workflow, I'm probably going to use GraphQL for my day-to-day. So showing how to kind of set this up for GraphQL seems like it's immediately practically applicable for me. So
Let's do it.
let's follow my preference, everyone.
It's your show. It's your show. I'm a guest. It's your house. I'll drink out of your cups, man. So yeah, just copy and paste that inside the query block there. Create a new one.
You said this was called limited sum.
If you want to make it match the repo. Yeah,
And
the
then
repo calls it limit adder, but it doesn't matter.
we'll
that
do-
wrong. And now we're going to give it 2 arguments, right? 2 operands. Yeah, num1, num2, ints for simplicity.
And this is going to give us back another
Then
int.
return an int.
And we'll make a function called limited sum.
There you go.
All right.
How much easier could it get, really?
So I'm going to merge schema by
Merge schema.
uploading this again. And what this should do is it just doesn't break anything that was already there. And had I done something destructive, it would have failed, right? It would have been like, nah, you can't do that because it's not mergeable.
Right. And that there's the 2 question mark helpers, like tooltips right there next to merge schema and override schema that show you the different behaviors and what's going to happen on each, right? So it aborts if the indexes are not compatible with the current schema. This one is like, for my SQL people, that's drop database, recreate everything, including your data. Your data is going away if you use that button. Don't use that button unless you know what it does, and then you'll know that it's okay to use it.
All right.
So again, if we call limited adder and give it 2 arguments, limited sum, then
What we want back is 6, but what we're going to get back is you have not finished doing this thing.
exactly
Okay.
right.
So then I'm going to go here and
The
we're going
Bobby
to
tables
get
button. Yes.
we're going to get back num1, num2.
Yep.
And then down here we're now out of my depth on FQL. I don't know what happens here. What if I just type add? Is that the right thing? Oh wait, but we want to do math.
You know what? Let's start there. Let's iterate, right? Like, let's just return the sum without any limits. And look at you. You got it. Yes.
I think
Yes.
I just
This is the FQL way.
You're doing it. You're doing it, Peter.
You're doing
All right, let's try this again. I'm going to go back out here. Let's run this. Hey, look at that. I just FQL'd.
See? Yeah.
Okay.
So now there's no limit on that. So you can do weird things
so I
like
could
put
do-
arbitrarily 2 large integers in there and get unexpected, weird JavaScripty results out of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, value too big to fit an int. Just just
Just JavaScript things.
drop some trailing characters. It's basically the same number. Just handle it however.
That's how I do math too. It's we call
That's
that Y2K math. Just roll it over.
Right. That's right. That's the 386. Well, that was a Pentium that had that bug, wasn't it? I'm old, y'all. I'm sorry. Forget it. And that probably made sense to like 5 people that will ever see this. But once upon a time, there was a thing that didn't work. All right. So
Once upon a time, there was a thing that didn't work. The never-ending story of web development.
yeah.
Okay, so now, wait, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let's look at this one.
Yeah.
We're
But I
looking at
appreciate
Lambda.
your attention to formatting.
I mean, this is a self-preservation instinct, honestly.
Which is fair.
All right, so here's our formatting, and we are now adding, but we want to make sure that these numbers are below a certain, or I guess we want to make sure that this is below a certain value.
Yeah. Let's do this in 2 phases.
Okay.
I'm going to walk you through a simple way that works, and then we're going to expand that to something that does the same thing, but is more realistic. And you
Okay.
can expand it to a lot more use cases. So first, let's just make it work, right? So really our condition is if the sum of these numbers is less than or equal to some limit,
Mm-hmm.
return the sum. Otherwise, throw an error. That sounds very much like an if statement. Conveniently, FQL has an if statement. Equally conveniently,
Rob can freeze right before we get.
if.
Oh, we lost you right as you started saying equally conveniently about an if statement.
Okay. I still hear you. So hopefully, like I said, I'll get in the, I'm still here.
Oh, we can hear you. We're good.
Wasn't that Joaquin Phoenix
autobiographical
film or something? Anyway.
Was that one autobiographical? I thought that was a publicity stunt. Anyways, this is not film. This is not film criticism with Jason's.
No. So all of my references are tangential and off topic. So if takes 3 arguments. If takes a condition and it takes a statement to perform if that condition evaluates to true.
Okay.
And it takes a statement to perform if that condition evaluates to false. Right? So we're gonna repeat ourselves. We're gonna violate the dry principle here and repeat ourselves. But our condition is if that sum that you have there is greater than or equal to some number, or is greater than some number. Okay. So let's order it the other way. Let's make it less than or equal to the limit. So in this case, we have LTE is the less than or equal to function. All this stuff is in the docs, of course. That's one that you kind of you need to know it's there. Otherwise you won't find it. Less than or equal takes 2 arguments. Exactly. Less than or equal takes 2 arguments. A number and a number. And if the first number is less than or equal to the second number, it returns true. And if it's not, it returns false.
Let's do an easy one. We'll do less than 100. So if this is less than or equal to this, or is it the other way around?
If that is less than or equal to 100, it evaluates to true.
Okay. All right. Good.
If it's strictly greater than, it evaluates to false. So if it's less than or equal to 100, we return that value that you've already got there. We know what to do there. If not, we want to throw an error. Abort is the key word for doing this. And abort will break you out of the transaction that you're in, all the way out to end the call with an error message that you specify. And that's a little aggressive of an error message, but it's not wrong. So we can keep that. That's fine. Right. That's fine.
Okay, so let's give this a shot then. It didn't fail. That's always good news. So let's make sure that it still does that math. Didn't hard code numbers. Okay.
No.
Now let's make it way too big.
There you go.
And I've successfully entertained myself. Thanks for coming, everybody.
That's what it's all about.
This is great. So we now have an actual limited sum. Now you said this can be better.
Right. If we go back to that function definition and we look at it, I'm not crazy about seeing that add var num1, var num2 in there twice, right? Like that. Here we can talk about compute ops. Every 50 FQL verbs is one compute op.
Okay.
So when we do add var, that's 3. When we do it twice, that's 6. Now, 3 and 6 are both less than 50, so that's one compute op. In this case, it's sort of trivial, right? But when you have realistic workloads with much bigger queries, much bigger guards and gates, you don't want to do things more than once.
Right.
You don't want to recalculate the same result. So what would be great would be if we could calculate that result, sort of store it somewhere, and then do the comparison against the stored value. If so, return the stored value. If not, return the error, right?
Yeah,
That's what the let keyword does for us in Fauna.
Okay. So I'm going to make a guess that I wrap everything with a let so that it's defined in that scope.
That is correct.
Okay.
Let takes 2 arguments. Let takes an object or a map, key value pairs. And then it takes an expression that we call in, but it's just the thing to do with those variables defined, right? Okay. So in this case, that entire if you don't call it in there. Sorry.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, it's that entire if statement is the second argument.
The entire if statement is the second argument.
Right.
Okay. And then
So-
the first one is going to be, I assume I need to pull this out.
Right.
Okay. Where does this go?
It goes inside that map of variables or values that you're pre-calculating and declaring for this context, right?
So
we can
I
call
can
it
just do like
sum.
this.
Right.
Okay. And so then when I use this, I am going to, what I assume there's a keyword for this, or do I
Well,
just write it out?
It's another variable, so you need to wrap it with the variable call less than or equal to var sum.
Okay. So we're just basically we're creating local scope.
Right. So there are three variables here, right? Two that are parameters that are passed in, and one that is created by the let statement. So this simple function here is actually showing a lot of different pieces of functionality of UDFs.
Nope, I missed something. I missed it where? One?
You're missing it on the sum line. You're missing a closing parentheses. Line 6. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, great. So then if I come back out here, same thing. Works.
Yeah. You should see the same results here.
Does not work. Perfect.
There you
Excellent.
go.
I mean, this is slick, right? I see where the value in this really starts to show up here because, it first of all, this just makes my life easier to not have to copy paste these values in over and over again. And you can also see how like you would be able to calculate something like I can take, this could be some derivative of any of the input. And I can do something like if the name that comes in is Rob, we could change the greeting based on that using this this kind of structure. So that's really cool. Like I can see that being when we talk about like I saw that the functions could have roles. These are also really cool things that we could do where like I'm kind of imagining right now I have some logic built that triggers a function only if you have certain access permissions, like if you're a moderator on Twitch or something like that, where these could actually just be built in just like this. And then it would happen on the data side instead of me having to write like JavaScript that then calls a database that then does more evaluation to see if you're allowed to use the data that came back, which is honestly a huge security problem.
Right. Yeah. It would just refuse to return it. And you can get really dialed in on that with ABAC too, right? Like not only are you logged in and authenticated and authorized to access the data, but is it working hours? Can you access only certain sensitive data from inside from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or whatever? Or is some other person logged in like a two-person control on it? Anything that you can calculate inside a query, you can use as an attribute.
So let's go one step further here, which I want to actually.
Let me add one thing before we go off the
please
screen, though. That let statement in there, any query can go in there too. So some could actually be some value that we retrieve from the database. And this is where like the feature flag example that we talked about, right? You can look up based on the user's ID. Are they enrolled for this feature? Did they subscribe for this feature? Are they, paying for it? However you want to use feature flags for dark deploys or whatever, that's one aspect of it. Reads are pretty good here. Be careful about writes there, in particular if they're going to cause contention, because all of these are transactions. They're all ACID compliant. Right. So they're all or none. It either is gonna happen or it isn't. Reads are much less problematic. But any query that you do there can go in there. And this is also where you would do your determining whether to intentionally fail or whatever else if you're doing chaos engineering on this.
Okay. So what I want to do then is I want to go one step further and I want to save some data.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking about something like this. And what I want to return back is a user. And so let's create our type user. And our type user is going to have a name, which will be a string, and a status, which will be a status. And then let's do an enum. I'm just going to do something. Do enums work in Fauna?
I believe so, yes. It's... Did I lose you?
I'm here.
No. Okay.
So
cool.
yeah, this is my thinking. Did I do that right? I think that's correct.
Front end, man, you're outside of my
okay,
my
maybe
comfort zone with GraphQL goes very quickly.
Let's do this. Let's not use an enum just so that we don't introduce any kind of chaos. But here's what I want to do. I want to have save user call a function, and that function is going to be determine coolness. And that's going, so we're going to pass in a name, and the function is going to determine, let's call it coolness instead. All right, so I'm ready.
You're going to have to pass it a user though, right? Or are you going to? Oh, no, I see what you're saying.
So this is like on
randomly calculate.
Yeah. So let's, because we would need to go further with this if we were going to make it like more professional, but we've also only got like 10 minutes left before we need to start tearing down. So I want to be realistic about what we're trying to accomplish here. But so now what I want to be able to do is in here, I want to be able to wait, did it just create a whole bunch of stuff for me? Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Okay, so now we've got, wait, which is the one that I wanted? Did it? Oh, here's mine is save user.
Yeah.
So I'm going to save
Yours,
user.
because you defined it, is going to be overridden.
So
the others are implicit.
I'm going to do this, and then what we'll get back is a name and a coolness. And when I run it right now, it's going to say you don't have a function, but we can go over here. And now I'm going to get a name. Yep. And then we want to do a let. And in my let, I need some data. And then I have more stuff that we're going to do. So I want to, let's see what I can figure out here. I'm going to get name. Well, actually, I don't even need this because we're not going to calculate anything here, are we? So I can just
you got to calculate the coolness, right?
This
is the place where you would generate the coolness.
That's true. Well, yeah, I was actually just going to do a hard string comparison and say that anybody who's not Jason is cool. But I guess we can do that, right?
Jasons of the world, you don't have to put up with this.
So let's do that. Let's set coolness here, and we'll calculate it once. And that would be an if var name, or wait, I need to do like an equal. What's a string comparison here? Is there like an equals? Equals, yes. Then cool, otherwise not. Oh wait, I did that backwards. Okay, so if, then I don't need an if here anymore. So instead, I want to do a write now. And this, I'm completely at C here because we haven't done this yet. But I want to write to my users collection, which has not been created. Do I need to create that first?
Oh, it has been created because you created it in the GraphQL schema.
That's right, I did.
So there's a users collection over there for you.
Okay, so then I need to write to that collection, and I don't know how to do that.
I am here for you, man. Create. The power of create. Create takes two arguments.
Okay.
One is a reference.
And this.
But well, don't try to type on this one yet. And then the second is the data. This is thing in a document is. Am I still waiting? As long as we got audio, we're good. You're going to create in the users that was created, right? Oh no.
Okay, wait, we're back. Users that were created.
Am I back?
You're back.
I'm back. Yeah. Create collection. And then users, I think was what you named it, right? What did you name it? It's case sensitive too. So whatever you named it in the schema.
Excellent. What did I name it in the schema? I called it user. So
create user.
Okay.
And then an object, right? So an object with name, var name, and not on that line, on the next line. So the first line is the reference, which is just collection user. That's where you're going to go to create a document. You're going to create a document in that collection. And then you give the body of the document, which in this case
I understand. Okay, so my coolness.
Name var name and coolness var coolness.
Cool. Okay, so I think I maybe slightly overcomplicated this one given the straightforwardness of this, but still, I'm into it.
It's a placeholder for you to go out and calculate all the things that you need to do inside your function.
Yeah. So let's try this, I think. No, I screwed it up. What did I do?
EC Win caught it in the chat. It needs to be data because the top level object contains the ref and the data. And so we have to give it,
Got it. So that'll work?
That should work, yes.
Okay, so let's save that. Try it again.
I always use couching language. It should work, yes.
Okay, so saved me, not cool.
Oh no.
Rob, cool. And then if I get another one out here, let's query users, find user. Oh no, is there like a get all users? There's not, but that's okay. We can go look at our collections instead.
Try list. Is there not a list users? I don't remember what it generates exactly.
I'm pretty sure with the GraphQL you have to actually define the all users, but we can go look at it here, and we can see.
Yep.
Here are our collections, and so we get ref, timestamp, data, and the calculated coolness. So this is, I mean, I can see a million ways that I would be able to use this, and I think that's what I find exciting about this is that it is nice to know that things that I've heard that you should do, like, hey, if you've got a database, you should set up stored procedures so that you can do all these safe things. I understand that in theory. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, yes, I agree with you, but I have no idea how. So I write JavaScript. And this starts to pick away at that and says, okay, so I can do these sorts of things on the database side. And really, is this a gross misrepresentation to say that what we're doing here is effectively creating a stored procedure?
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly
perfect.
What it is.
And so this is great because now, without having to become a DBA, without having to figure out how to actually manage this stuff, I'm able to do these more this is pretty powerful stuff that's not going to happen client side or in a serverless function. It's going to happen right during the query. So and how does this affect speed, like doing it here versus doing it somewhere else?
Yeah, so this is one thing that I'm working on getting hard numbers around. The soft answer is minimally. Like I talked about the wrappers for like write a gated create or a guarded create versus a primitive create. Minimal, meaning like 5% is what I'm observing. And when you think about that compared to round trip on the network, it's essentially not different.
And there's also the fact that like the way that we've configured this work will happen exactly one time when you store the thing. If you were doing it like ways that I have implemented things like this, ways that I've seen things like this implemented would be, I would store the name in the database, and every time I queried the database, I would run that coolness calculation as part of my client-side code.
Mm-hmm.
That is, and again, I would do that because it's like, oh, well, that's flexible. I can change it in the future, and I know how to do that. But we can do that here on like a query calculation. If we needed to, we could do some kind of like a data migration thing where we could run this function with a different set, right? And recalculate these values.
Yeah. Functions can be routers where you can check the version sent in from the client. And if it's an old version, you mangle the data to the new format, call the new function, mangle the result, send that back, right? Without, say you have like embedded code, right? Embedded devices that are notoriously difficult to update. And you have to assume that those updates will fail and they're out there the way they are. You always have to support that API version. You can do that in a function. You can't do that if you're calling a primitive, right? Because create is going to take what you give it and put it in there.
Yeah.
A guarded create type function is going to allow you to modify that and modify it and modify it. So it's really, really powerful for that migration use case as well.
That's super cool. Okay, so if we're kind of I think this is probably about all we have time for to build today. So for somebody who's interested in going deeper on this, what are next steps? Where can we go to learn more?
Yeah, so check out the repo. There's 2 more examples in there that add roles, as well as versions of what you and I have built today. Those roles allow you to do more with permissions where, okay, hey, look, nobody can call, create, update, delete. Only this function can, and you have to go through this function, which itself enforces the ABAC, right? So you can see how that becomes a powerful pattern. The do not use that function, that's the role, sorry. Yeah, that role just gives access to do those operations on the stores collection from the sample data. Everything in the repo is built to work with the sample data, the pre-populate with demo data option. So nice. That's the first step. The next step would be go back to Fauna Labs and click around. One of our DAs, Brecht, who has been in the chat here answering some
Where's Labs?
Great questions. Sorry, the organization where that repo was. If you go back to the repo
I understand.
link,
Sorry,
yeah,
Fauna
the
Labs.
Labs.
Got it.
Org. Brecht has created a number of Fauna Blueprints here, which are more FQL, and they're also in JavaScript. So nice. It shows you both ways of like implementing this directly as well as implementing it in your code. Those pinned repositories there, the Fauna Schema Migrate tool, allows you to create these functions as infrastructure as code and apply those migrations. So this is like really, you're starting to get into the deep cuts here when you're using functions with versioning. And then that Twitter application is a rewrite of Twitter using Fauna, which all these concepts that we've explored are right there inside that code in an application that you can download, run, modify, et cetera, and begin to really understand how all of these things work together. So nice. Those are the ones that I would start with right there. Those 3 pinned repositories will really get you a long way. And of course, docs are your friend, blogs are your friend. Questions, hit me up on Twitter. You've got my Twitter.
And here, so this is like, if we want to do functions, we're going to need this FQL setup, right? This is where we're going to find all of those functions and all the pieces that we did there.
That's correct. But if you go back to the repo at the bottom of it, hopefully I'm not making a liar out of myself. I'm pretty sure I added a next steps. Hey, look at that.
Hey, look at that.
This series of tutorials for FQL that was done by Pierre Bover, who I don't feel like I'm doxing him by saying this, but he said on Twitter today very publicly that it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Pierre. Really appreciate everything that you do for Fauna and all the help that you provide to builders. It's awesome, and I hope you have a great day. He's built this wonderful series of tutorials that really take you through a deep dive of FQL, including user-defined functions, but also including other concepts like indexes and roles and things that you'll need to really build effectively with Fauna on a big scale.
Very cool. Well, that sounds super exciting. So, this is like, I can see a huge amount of application for this. I can see this being something that really lets us make good decisions about our data without adding a lot of complexity to the way that we are actually managing it. I'm really excited to see what folks are going to build with this. I feel like I'm seeing more and more advanced applications. The fact that you've got a Twitter clone built is very, very cool. And I'm seeing more and more people who would typically call themselves front-end developers building these very advanced, like, serverless applications with custom databases and all these API integrations, all stuff that 10, 15 years ago, there's no chance that you would have been able to build all of the things that you're able to build now.
Yeah.
Especially if you were to call yourself like, I'm a front-end developer, but the front has extended quite a ways deeper into the stack than you would have maybe Jamstack. But there's a whole world of possibilities out there. So even if you think that you are only a front-end developer, like I couldn't do this data stuff, I couldn't do that, dig into this a little bit. Look at what serverless unlocks, look at what these platforms unlock, and see how far you can get, because I bet you can get further than you think.
Yeah.
So Rob, I'm gonna kick everybody over to your Twitter again. Where else should people go if they want to keep up with you?
I once upon a time streamed a lot and hope to start doing so again. I'm on twitch.tv/Rob Sutter.
Oops, that's the wrong window. Here we go.
My GitHub is far less interesting than the Fauna Labs repo, so go there. If you want to email me, if you're that kind, if that's how you roll, rob@fauna.com. That's a pretty straightforward. Here, I'll dox myself in the chat there. But I'm always happy to hear from users, help answer questions where I can. There's the Fauna forums are a great place to look for help. I'm not trying to push you away from me. I'm saying maybe your question's already answered, and then the Fauna forums are a great place to find that. But yeah, I'm very active on Twitter. My DMs are open. So if you hit me up there, I'll get back to you.
Great. Forums.fauna.com. That's what we're talking about. Actually, I'm just going to link to this this community page because it looks like there's also a Slack channel.
There is.
So get in there and check that out. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to call this one a success. As always, we have had Rachel here from White Coat Captioning live captioning this whole process. Thank you so much for being here. And that's made possible by Netlify, Fauna, Auth0, and Hasura, all of whom are kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people. While you're over on the website, make sure you check out the schedule. We've got a lot of really fun stuff coming up, and apparently my styles didn't kick in. There we go. There they are.
Very large picture of my head.
We've got Mark Erickson is coming in later this week. We're going to learn modern Redux. He's been working really hard on this to make Redux more approachable, a little bit less boilerplate, a little more understandable, and I'm super excited to see how all that has been going. I have a bunch of episodes that I haven't added yet, so I'm going to get on that and actually make that happen, but we've got all sorts of fun things coming up. So make sure you go and check out that schedule and click this add on Google Calendar button so that you can see what's coming and, get a little heads up when we're about to go live. With that, Rob, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blast. Chat, stay tuned. We're going to go find somebody to raid. We will see you next time.